If you're tired of being disrespected and letting others cross your boundaries without consequences, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into an incredibly powerful principle from the great political strategist, Niccolò Machiavelli, that can change the way you approach every social interaction, every disagreement, and every challenging relationship. Imagine this. What if instead of reacting emotionally when someone disrespects you, you could handle it with such calm, precision, and control that not only does the person think twice before ever crossing you again, but everyone around you starts to treat you with a new level of respect? Sounds powerful, right? Well, that's the essence of Machiavelli's philosophy on handling disrespect. His ideas go far beyond just managing conflict. They're about shaping how others perceive and treat you. It's not about revenge or retaliation. It's about turning the tables in your favor, using one of the most underestimated tools we all have: silence and strategic action. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Machiavelli recommends handling disrespect, how to stop letting others walk all over you, and how to become someone who commands respect without saying a word. If you've ever found yourself stuck in toxic relationships or situations where people push your boundaries, this video will open your eyes to a whole new way of asserting yourself. But before we get into the details, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with anyone who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We got a ton of empowering content lined up for you. And if you really want to support the channel, feel free to leave a super thanks below. Every little bit helps us keep creating high-quality content for you. Now, let's get into it. Disrespect is a subtle, insidious force. It often begins with small, seemingly harmless acts: an offhand joke, a glance that lingers a bit too long, a slight tone shift in conversation. In the early stages, these acts can easily be dismissed, brushed off, and ignored. It's natural for people to think it's not worth reacting to, or I'll let it slide. However, ignoring such behavior sets a dangerous precedent. Disrespect, when left unchecked, grows louder and more frequent. What starts as a minor slight can eventually escalate into something much more harmful. And by the time we realize the full weight of the situation, it's often too late to regain control. The truth is that respect is not something you earn in the traditional sense. It's something you must enforce. It's a critical distinction, and it's one that many people overlook. In everyday interactions, we tend to think that respect comes from proving our worth, from being good enough or deserving enough. But in reality, respect is maintained by the boundaries you set and the way you demand to be treated. If you allow disrespect to slide once, it gives the impression that it's acceptable, that it can happen again. This is why it's so important to address disrespect head-on as soon as it occurs, not later, when the damage has already been done. When we talk about disrespect, it's crucial to understand that it's rarely personal at first. It's a test to probe to see how far someone can push before you react. If you let it slide, you're not just allowing that one instance of disrespect, but you're signaling to the person that it's okay to cross your boundaries again. It's about power dynamics. Disrespect thrives when there is no consequence, no pushback. But when someone is met with resistance, with a clear boundary that refuses to bend, that disrespect tends to evaporate. The key is to respond in a way that makes it clear this behavior is not acceptable. And not just to the person who disrespected you, but to everyone else around you as well. You're not just establishing your own boundaries, but you're teaching others how to treat you. The subtle nature of disrespect means that many people don't even realize they're being disrespectful until they encounter a response that challenges their behavior. Think about a workplace situation where a colleague makes a snide comment about your work in front of others. They might think it's just a joke, a harmless remark. However, if you don't respond, if you just laugh it off or pretend it doesn't bother you, they'll feel validated. It becomes a signal to others in the room that it's okay to belittle or disrespect you in the same way. The moment you allow it, you give permission for the behavior to continue. But when you respond calmly, firmly, you set a new precedent. The next time that colleague considers making a joke at your expense, they'll think twice. Not because you reacted with anger or frustration, but because you handled the situation with such calm and confidence that they realize they can't get away with it. The initial reaction to disrespect often comes down to two choices. Either you react emotionally or you withdraw strategically. Emotional reactions, such as lashing out in anger or becoming defensive, lose you status. When you react emotionally, you show that the disrespect has affected you, that it's getting under your skin. It's a sign of weakness, and unfortunately, people can sense that. On the other hand, when you withdraw strategically, when you don't give the person the reaction they're hoping for, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is a powerful tool. When you refuse to give them what they expect, when you make them second-guess their actions, you take away their power to control the situation. This is where silence becomes your ally. But silence doesn't mean ignoring the disrespect. It means making your absence felt. It means withdrawing your energy, your attention, and your presence in a way that forces the person to recognize that their behavior is not acceptable. It's about refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction, refusing to let them dictate the emotional tone of the interaction. Instead of responding with a defensive argument or a joke to dismiss the comment, you turn the tables and make them feel the weight of their words. You don't need to shout or escalate. You simply create a moment of stillness. A moment where the disrespect is left hanging in the air, unresolved, uncomfortable. The silence is often louder than words, and it makes them question their own actions. This withdrawal strategy also prevents the disrespect from escalating. The moment you react emotionally, you give the other person more power. They might continue with their disrespect because they see they've already gotten under your skin. But when you don't give them the satisfaction of an emotional response, you leave them with nothing to feed off of. That's when the disrespect loses its power. It becomes a desperate grab at control that nobody will take seriously. Take, for example, a situation in a social setting where someone makes a sarcastic remark about your appearance. If you immediately respond by defending yourself or making a joke back, you're feeding into their game. You're giving them the emotional reaction they were hoping for. However, if you simply pause, look them in the eye, and say nothing if you refuse to engage with their comment, you show them that their words have no power over you. It's a quiet but powerful rejection of their disrespect. And in that silence, they begin to question their own behavior. They're left wondering if they've crossed a line, unsure whether they've embarrassed themselves. In situations like this, many people fail to realize the importance of consistency. If you let someone disrespect you once and then handle it with silence and distance, that's effective. But if they sense that the door is still open, that you're still willing to laugh things off or let it slide again, they'll test it again. And this is where you need to reinforce the boundary you've set. Consistency is key to maintaining respect. You cannot allow the same behavior to continue, because once you do, the person will think it's okay to do it again. When you handle disrespect, you don't go back to normal. You create a new normal, a new standard for how people are allowed to treat you. Machiavelli knew that in the game of power, consistency is what makes the difference between someone who is respected and someone who is ignored. It's not about being loud or domineering. It's about making it clear that your boundaries are non-negotiable. The key is to act decisively, to show others that you're not available for disrespect, and to reinforce that position through every interaction. When you set the standard for how you expect to be treated, people begin to take notice. Your actions speak louder than words, and they set the tone for how others will treat you in the future. Furthermore, the way you handle disrespect in public also plays a crucial role. When a violation happens in front of others, it's not just about addressing the person who disrespected you, it's about educating the room. It's about showing everyone around you that this behavior is not acceptable and that you won't tolerate it. Publicly punishing disrespect, when done in a calm and strategic way, teaches others how to behave around you. It sets a standard, and people begin to understand that crossing your boundaries is not an option. The more you reinforce this idea, the less likely others will test your limits. In the aftermath of a disrespectful act, it's essential to understand that the person may try to test your boundaries again, but in more subtle ways. Disrespect doesn't always come in the form of a loud insult. Sometimes it's a quiet exclusion, a passive-aggressive remark, or a veiled comment meant to make you feel small. These subtle attacks are designed to gauge how much they can get away with. And when this happens, you must once again demonstrate that the boundary is not to be crossed. Your response must be just as measured and consistent as before, so they understand that no violation will go unchallenged. This process of reinforcing boundaries and responding to disrespect is not about seeking revenge or creating drama. It's about maintaining control, keeping your dignity intact, and teaching others how to treat you. When you stop allowing disrespect to slide, you stop being a victim to it. You take away the power that others have to make you feel less than. You command respect not through force, but through consistency, silence, and a refusal to engage in emotional drama. Machiavelli's teachings are often misunderstood as simply about dominance and manipulation, but in truth, they're about the power of discipline, control, and self-respect. Respect, in this sense, is not a gift that is given to you by others. It is something you create and enforce through your actions. By establishing clear boundaries and sticking to them, you not only protect yourself from disrespect, but you also set the tone for how others will behave around you. This is how you ensure that respect is not something you have to ask for, but something that others give freely because they understand that crossing you comes with consequences. Machiavelli's philosophy on dealing with disrespect, particularly his concept of strategic silence, is one of the most powerful tools in understanding how to maintain control and power in any situation. It's a principle that requires deep self-discipline and an understanding of the psychological impact silence can have on others. Strategic silence is not about ignoring disrespect or tolerating bad behavior. It's a calculated step that forces others to confront their actions and creates a sense of unpredictability in your responses. The power of silence, when used properly, is subtle yet incredibly effective, often far more so than any immediate verbal retaliation could be. When someone disrespects you, the natural impulse is often to respond quickly, to defend yourself, or to retaliate. However, Machiavelli's approach suggests the exact opposite. He advocates for withdrawing your energy, refraining from giving any emotional reaction to the disrespect. This is not a passive act. Instead, it is an active decision to withhold your attention, your words, and your energy from the disrespectful person. When someone makes a rude comment or tries to provoke you, you don't engage with them. You don't argue back, and you don't explain yourself. Instead, you create a void, an absence, that forces the other person to feel the weight of their actions. This approach is incredibly powerful because it forces the person who disrespects you to question their own behavior. They begin to realize that their words or actions have had no effect on you, and this leaves them in a state of uncertainty. They may begin to feel uncomfortable in the silence, wondering if they've overstepped a boundary they didn't realize existed. This is a psychological game, and the moment you withdraw your energy, you take control. You make it clear that you will not be manipulated or coerced into a response. Instead, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability in any social or power dynamic is a tremendous asset. An example of this principle in action can be seen in many workplace situations. Imagine a colleague makes a snide remark about your work performance during a meeting. If you react emotionally, whether by defending yourself or attempting to counterattack, you're essentially allowing them to dictate the terms of the interaction. They have succeeded in drawing you into their drama. However, if you choose to remain silent, if you refuse to give them the satisfaction of a reaction, it leaves them with nothing to feed off. They may look around, noticing that their comment has fallen flat. The silence in the room will become noticeable, and the power dynamics will shift. Rather than losing your position by reacting, you reinforce it by withdrawing your emotional energy from the situation. The beauty of this tactic is that it turns the focus back on the person who initiated the disrespect. When you don't respond, they start to feel exposed. They may have thought they could get away with their comment without any repercussions, but your silence makes them question themselves. It's no longer about what they said. It's about the fact that they are now confronted with the reality that they've crossed a boundary that they didn't realize was there. They begin to feel uncomfortable, and the power is no longer in their hands. Another significant aspect of strategic silence is its ability to make the disrespectful person feel isolated. Disrespect often thrives when it is met with attention or a response, as it feeds the disrespectful person's ego. They crave the reaction, whether it's a defense of their actions, an argument, or even a simple acknowledgement. By withdrawing your energy, you deny them that fuel. They are left to stew in their own actions, and this isolation forces them to confront their own insecurities. The more you withhold your engagement, the more they are forced to reckon with their own behavior. In social dynamics, people often look for validation, whether it's from peers, colleagues, or even strangers. Disrespectful individuals often test boundaries to see how far they can push others without facing consequences. When you choose silence, you make it clear that their behavior is not acceptable without needing to verbally announce it. The absence of your engagement becomes a clear signal, and it's far more powerful than any verbal confrontation could be. This approach also prevents you from being dragged into unnecessary drama or conflict, as it forces the other person to confront their own actions without any emotional involvement from you. Strategic silence also plays a critical role in maintaining your own sense of dignity and self-respect. When you react emotionally to disrespect, you lose control of the situation. Your emotions take over, and in doing so, you lower yourself to the level of the person who disrespects you. It can be difficult to remain calm and composed when someone insults or disrespects you. But this is where the power of silence comes into play. By maintaining composure and not allowing yourself to be provoked, you keep control of your emotions and your actions. This not only strengthens your position in the moment, but also sends a message to others that you are not easily manipulated or swayed by external provocations. Consider a personal relationship, where a partner or friend may make a critical or dismissive comment. It can be tempting to immediately respond, to defend your actions or explain yourself. However, responding in this way often leads to a back and forth that escalates the conflict. Instead, if you choose to remain silent, the power dynamics shift. The other person may feel compelled to address the silence, and in doing so, they expose their own insecurities. They may apologize, or they may try to push the issue further. Either way, they're no longer in control of the situation. You have set a boundary, and you've done so without the need for confrontation. In these situations, silence creates an aura of mystery and unpredictability. People are often uncomfortable with silence because it leaves them uncertain of your intentions and actions. This unpredictability works in your favor because it keeps others on their toes. They don't know how you will respond, and that uncertainty can cause them to hesitate before testing your boundaries again. This hesitation, this self-doubt, is the key to controlling how others treat you. The more unpredictable you are, the less likely people are to disrespect you in the first place. Machiavelli's approach of strategic silence is not just about avoiding conflict. It's about establishing control over how you are treated. When you withdraw your energy and refuse to engage with disrespect, you make it clear that you will not be manipulated or coerced into a reaction. This ability to maintain composure, to be unpredictable and unapproachable when necessary, is a powerful tool in any social or power dynamic. It forces others to respect your boundaries because they understand that crossing them comes with consequences that they may not fully understand or anticipate. The ability to stay silent and composed in the face of disrespect is a mark of strength and control. It requires self-awareness and the ability to regulate your emotions, but the payoff is immense. You become someone who is respected not because you demand it, but because you've made it clear that disrespect will not be tolerated. Your silence becomes a powerful tool that forces others to reflect on their actions and think twice before crossing your boundaries again. In the end, strategic silence is a powerful form of self-respect, one that not only protects you, but also teaches others how to treat you with the respect you deserve. Machiavelli's strategic approach to power dynamics particularly in how to handle disrespect, emphasizes the importance of exposing the true nature of an adversary without immediately resorting to retaliation. He believed in the value of allowing an enemy to reveal their intentions, as this exposes their weakness more than a direct confrontation would. In dealing with disrespect, Machiavelli's technique of exposure through questioning is key to understanding how to maintain control while forcing the aggressor to confront their own actions. This method doesn't require direct retaliation or insult, but uses a calculated form of inquiry that shifts the power dynamic. The concept of exposing a violation of respect without attacking is both subtle and powerful. Machiavelli understood that direct retaliation could escalate a conflict and make you appear just as petty or weak as the person disrespecting you. Instead, he advocated for using the violator's own words and actions against them, putting them in a position where they must justify their behavior. By asking simple but pointed questions, you force the disrespectful individual to acknowledge their actions without you having to engage in any emotional outburst. This technique is rooted in the idea that the one who controls the narrative, the one who remains composed and precise, holds the power. Consider a situation in the workplace where a colleague makes a comment that undermines your work or belittles you in front of others. Instead of reacting with anger, as many people would, Machiavelli's method suggests you should calmly turn the table. You might ask them, "Did you mean to say that in that way?" Or, "Are you sure you want to repeat that?" These questions are not merely requests for clarification, but a subtle form of exposing the violation. By doing this, you're forcing the person to reflect on their words and potentially make them feel uncomfortable for their behavior. The act of asking such questions requires the disrespectful individual to make a decision. Either they back down and apologize, or they double down on their actions, making their disrespect public. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't allow the individual to hide behind their words. They are now exposed to the social pressure of their actions. The question acts like a mirror that reflects the wrong behavior back at them. Most people who engage in disrespectful behavior do so because they feel they can get away with it, or because they expect no consequences. But when you confront them calmly, with a well-timed question, it creates a moment of vulnerability. It's a psychological tactic that forces them to re-examine their behavior, all while you remain composed. Take, for example, a situation in a group discussion where someone cuts you off, belittles your ideas, or makes a sarcastic remark. Instead of responding with a defensive argument or retaliating with sarcasm, you simply ask, "Did you mean to speak to me that way, or are you sure that comment was necessary?" These simple questions immediately put the aggressor on the spot, making them aware that their actions are being scrutinized. The beauty of this tactic is that it makes them the focus, not their attack on you. It shifts the power dynamic from them controlling the situation through disrespect to them being forced to confront their actions. Another key aspect of this technique is that it prevents the confrontation from escalating into a battle of egos. When someone disrespects you, the temptation to engage in a heated argument can be strong, especially when you feel personally attacked. However, retaliating emotionally only plays into the hands of the person who disrespects you. It provides them with the reaction they wanted, thereby continuing the cycle of disrespect. Instead, by asking a question, you take control of the narrative. You don't have to raise your voice or get defensive, but by pointing out the violation, you place them in the uncomfortable position of defending themselves. A real-life example of this can be seen in corporate settings. Imagine being in a meeting and a colleague undermines your contribution or dismisses your idea as unimportant. The usual response might be to argue back or try to defend your idea forcefully. But by employing Machiavelli's strategy, you could simply ask, "That's an interesting point, but did you mean to suggest my idea isn't valuable? Or do you feel my perspective isn't valid?" These questions not only highlight the disrespect, but also invite the individual to publicly confirm their position. If they back down, they lose face in front of the group. If they persist, they only further expose themselves as someone unwilling to acknowledge their disrespect. It's important to note that this approach requires a sense of calm, and control. The person asking the question must remain composed and unflappable. Otherwise, the technique will lose its effectiveness. If you become defensive or emotional, you risk undermining your own position. But when you ask these questions with a sense of detachment, without allowing the disrespect to affect you emotionally, you maintain control over the interaction. What this approach also does is force the person disrespecting you to justify their actions, not only to you, but also to others who are watching. In a social setting or group conversation, disrespect is often a way for people to assert dominance or control. But when you challenge that disrespect publicly by asking a question, you make them explain their behavior in front of others. This is a powerful move because it shifts the social dynamics. The disrespectful person is no longer in control of the situation, they are now on the defensive. People around them will start to question whether the disrespect was truly justified, and that doubt works in your favor. In a more personal setting, such as a relationship or friendship, you can use the same technique to expose disrespect. For instance, if a friend makes a cutting remark that hurts your feelings rather than letting it slide or responding with anger, you might say, "Are you sure that's what you meant to say?" Or, "Did that comment feel necessary to you?" This forces them to acknowledge the harm their words caused without you having to escalate the situation. It's an invitation for them to rethink their behavior without you needing to demand an apology or engage in a confrontation. The psychological effect of such questioning is significant. It doesn't just force the person who disrespects you to confront their actions in the moment. It also serves as a warning for others around you. When people see that you handle disrespect with such poise and clarity, they start to understand that crossing your boundaries has consequences. They begin to recognize that you will not tolerate bad behavior, and this knowledge influences how they treat you in the future. Machiavelli's tactic of exposing disrespect through questioning is an invaluable tool in maintaining power and control over your interactions. It's not about winning a fight or proving someone wrong. It's about exposing the violation for what it is, making the disrespectful person confront their own behavior, and ensuring that others understand that you won't tolerate such actions. By doing this, you prevent further disrespect, reinforce your boundaries, and maintain your dignity without ever needing to engage in a full-blown confrontation. What's crucial to understand here is that the question is not just a means of exposing the disrespectful individual's actions, it is also a method of self-empowerment. You are in control of the interaction, and you set the terms for how people treat you. When you ask these questions, you do not allow others to dictate the emotional tone of the interaction. You dictate the tone, and by doing so, you force others to treat you with the respect you deserve. In the long run, this strategy builds your reputation as someone who is not easily manipulated or disrespected. People begin to understand that you are someone who will not engage in drama or react emotionally, but will instead expose bad behavior for what it is. This, in turn, leads to a greater level of respect from others. They begin to treat you with more consideration, knowing that any disrespect will be met with measured, calculated exposure, not anger, not retaliation, but calm, controlled questioning that forces them to justify their actions. This is the essence of Machiavelli's approach to power, not through dominance or force, but through the ability to control how others treat you by exposing their disrespect and forcing them to confront it publicly. When disrespect occurs repeatedly, it is critical to avoid returning to normal. In many social and professional situations, individuals face ongoing instances of disrespect, whether it's subtle or blatant. The mistake many make in these situations is to act as though everything is fine, to slip back into the same dynamics as before. This is a dangerous mistake. Repeated disrespect, if not addressed properly, establishes a pattern, and allowing it to continue unchecked signals that it's permissible. To break this cycle is crucial to change the way you interact with the person who has disrespected you. Machiavelli's advice on this matter revolves around redefining the relationship, both for yourself and for the person who has shown disrespect. The principle of re-establishing boundaries is a key aspect of Machiavellian strategy. Once you have set a boundary, especially after someone crosses it, you cannot simply return to the previous dynamic. There is no going back after a violation. Doing so only weakens your position. The person who disrespects you may think that after a confrontation or moment of tension, things will return to normal. They may expect you to let it slide, to act as if nothing happened. But, as Machiavelli would advise, this is precisely the moment to reinforce your boundaries and redefine the relationship. It's not about being vindictive, nor is it about making a public spectacle. It's about communicating through your actions and behavior that the previous dynamic is no longer acceptable. When someone disrespects you multiple times, the instinct might be to maintain a sense of familiarity or comfort with them. It's easy to slip back into the old patterns of behavior, laughing off the insults, accepting the dismissive comments, or downplaying the offense. However, this approach only weakens your position further. Repeated disrespect should not be met with compliance, but rather with a solid reinforcement of your boundaries. This is where Machiavelli's strategy comes into play, the shift in behavior. The shift is subtle, and it doesn't need to be overt or announced. It's about your demeanor, your tone, and how you interact. You do not need to explain the shift, but rather let it be felt. Let's break this down with an example that most people can relate to professional relationships. Imagine you're working with a colleague who constantly undermines your ideas in meetings. Initially, you might try to engage with them directly, defending your ideas or offering explanations. However, after several instances of being undermined, a shift needs to occur. The next time they try to dismiss your idea, you don't defend it. You don't explain or try to convince them. Instead, you let your silence speak. You withhold your energy and your attention, refusing to play into their narrative. You may continue with your work, engage with others in the room, but you don't acknowledge the disrespect. The shift doesn't need to be announced, but it becomes apparent to everyone that you are no longer the same person willing to entertain such behavior. This subtle shift is extremely powerful because it forces the other person to question their position. They will notice that the response they used to get from you is no longer there. They might feel confused or uncomfortable because their previous tactics no longer work. They're used to pushing your buttons, knowing that you would react, but now they face your silence. This change in behavior forces them to reconsider their actions and may even force them to apologize or back down, not because you directly confronted them, but because you no longer validate their actions with your attention or reaction. In personal relationships, this same approach can be applied. Let's say you have a friend or a partner who consistently takes you for granted, making disrespectful comments or dismissive gestures. The natural reaction might be to lash out or try to explain why their behavior is hurtful. However, continuing down that path simply perpetuates the disrespect. Instead, you must redefine the relationship. This means no longer accepting their behavior as normal, no longer engaging in the same conversations where they undermine you or dismiss your feelings. You don't need to announce it to them. They will feel the change in your demeanor. You become less available emotionally and physically, and you stop tolerating the things you once did. It's crucial to remember that this shift is not about creating distance out of anger or resentment. It is about self-preservation and maintaining your dignity. In fact, the shift should be calm, calculated, and free of any emotional outbursts. By maintaining your composure and your distance, you make it clear that you are no longer available for their disrespect. You communicate that your time, energy, and respect are valuable, and that they must be earned, not taken for granted. The beauty of Machiavelli's strategy lies in its subtlety. It's not about making a public declaration, shouting from the rooftops that you won't be disrespected anymore. It's about changing the energy you bring to the relationship. This is what makes the approach so powerful it is felt, not explained. For instance, when you stop responding to passive-aggressive comments or dismissive behavior, you communicate with a much stronger force than any words could. This is the essence of Machiavelli's approach to maintaining control over power dynamics. Moreover, the shift in behavior serves as a lesson not only to the person who has disrespected you, but also to the others around you. People are always watching, and how you respond to disrespect, especially when it becomes a repeated issue, will shape how others treat you. If you continue to allow disrespect, others will begin to see it as acceptable, and they will feel free to disrespect you as well. However, if you assert your boundaries consistently, you set a standard for how you are treated. This standard becomes known, and over time, people will be less likely to disrespect you because they understand that it comes with consequences. Your change in behavior becomes a blueprint for others on how to interact with you, and it forces them to either respect you or step away. When you begin to change how you interact with someone who has repeatedly disrespected you, it sends a message to the entire social group. In a professional setting, colleagues may start to see you as someone who is not easily manipulated, someone who won't tolerate mistreatment. This raises your status in the group, not through aggression or dominance, but through quiet assertiveness and a consistent refusal to engage in disrespectful dynamics. In personal relationships, the same principle applies. When you stop engaging with a disrespectful partner or friend, they begin to realize that you value yourself and your boundaries more than the relationship itself. This, in turn, often leads them to either adjust their behavior or pull away, as they understand that they can no longer cross the line without facing consequences. The key to successfully redefining a relationship after repeated disrespect is consistency. Machiavelli understood that one instance of a shift in behavior is not enough. People may test your boundaries again, seeing if you will revert to the old dynamic. If you do, you risk sending the message that the boundary wasn't really serious. But if you remain consistent, if you continue to maintain the distance and assert your boundaries, the person will come to understand that you are no longer available for their negative behavior. This consistency sends a powerful signal. You will not accept disrespect, and you will not allow others to mistreat you. Consider a workplace scenario where a colleague repeatedly takes credit for your work. The first time, you might let it go, thinking it's a misunderstanding. The second time, you might mention it casually, but they don't change their behavior. By the third time, you need to make a shift in how you interact with them. You no longer engage with them the same way. You stop providing them with information freely, and you make it clear that you expect proper acknowledgement. This shift isn't announced with a confrontation or a speech, it's felt in your actions. You stop accommodating their behavior, and they start to realize that their old tactics no longer work. By refusing to go back to normal after repeated disrespect, you create a new dynamic that is more in line with how you deserve to be treated. This change is subtle but profound, and it forces the person who disrespects you to recognize that they can no longer act with impunity. You may not have to confront them directly, but your actions will speak volumes. In the end, Machiavelli's approach shows that power is often found not in direct confrontation, but in the quiet, consistent enforcement of boundaries. By refusing to go back to the way things were, you reclaim control and set the terms for how others interact with you moving forward. Machiavelli's philosophy on power and respect offers a nuanced approach to handling disrespect, especially when the violation occurs repeatedly. One of his most important principles is that punishment should exceed the offense to ensure it becomes unforgettable. This idea is particularly effective when dealing with someone who has crossed your boundaries and disrespected you multiple times. Rather than engaging in a cycle of retaliation or escalation, Machiavelli's strategy encourages creating consequences that are disproportionate to the initial offense, thereby sending a clear message that such behavior will not be tolerated, and that the person who disrespects you has lost access to your respect and attention. The key here is not revenge, but control. By ensuring the punishment for disrespect is greater than the disrespect itself, you establish the terms of engagement with others, clearly defining your boundaries in a way that others will internalize. This method is rooted in the principle that respect is not freely given, it must be earned and maintained through clear boundaries and consequences. Machiavelli understood that the greatest way to assert control over your environment is to make others fear the consequences of crossing you. But instead of doing so through brute force or obvious retaliation, you create a system where your absence, your refusal to engage, becomes the punishment. Take, for example, a workplace scenario. If a colleague consistently takes credit for your work, you may initially try to resolve the issue by speaking to them directly. However, if they continue the same behavior, you need to reassess your approach. Instead of confronting them aggressively or engaging in arguments, you withdraw your energy from the relationship. You stop sharing your work with them. You cease to offer any information that could be used to undermine you, and you make it clear that you are no longer available to assist them. The consequence of their disrespect is not one of public humiliation or conflict. Instead, it is the absence of your presence. They no longer have access to the value you bring to the table. And this absence speaks louder than any words could. In this way, the punishment far exceeds the original offense because they are now cut off from a resource they once relied on. By withdrawing your energy and refusing to engage, you make it clear that their actions have consequences. Machiavelli knew that power comes from being able to control the flow of attention and resources. In many cases, people disrespect others because they believe there will be no consequences because they think their actions will not result in a shift in the relationship. However, when you refuse to engage and withdraw from the relationship, it forces them to confront the gravity of their behavior. They may try to reintegrate into your circle or win back your favor. But the absence of your involvement makes it clear that they can no longer dictate the terms of the relationship. They've lost access to you, and that, in itself, is a powerful punishment. This method of creating disproportionate consequences is effective in many social and professional settings. In social dynamics, for instance, people often push boundaries to see what they can get away with. Disrespect is a way to assert dominance or establish superiority, and when there is no immediate pushback, it emboldens the person who disrespects you. However, by creating consequences that are disproportionate to the offense, you break the cycle of disrespect and set a new standard for how others treat you. This approach is not about making a spectacle out of the person who disrespects you. Instead, it is about making sure that they understand their behavior will not be tolerated. In a personal relationship, the same principle applies. Imagine a situation where a partner repeatedly takes you for granted, ignoring your needs or dismissing your feelings. Initially, you might try to communicate your feelings or explain how their actions hurt you. But if the behavior continues, you must make a shift. You stop accommodating their actions. You stop providing emotional support when it's not reciprocated, and you no longer give them the benefit of the doubt. The consequence of their repeated disrespect is that they no longer have access to the emotional investment you once freely gave. This absence forces them to reckon with the consequences of their behavior. They may try to make amends, but the key here is that their access to your attention and affection is no longer guaranteed. They now have to work harder to earn back the trust and respect they have lost, and this imbalance creates a natural consequence for their actions. The idea of creating disproportionate consequences also involves a shift in social dynamics. Machiavelli understood that when you publicly punish an offense, you not only teach the person who disrespected you a lesson, but you also send a message to the wider group. People are watching how you respond to disrespect, and if you handle the situation with strength and composure, others will take note. They will understand that crossing your boundaries has significant consequences. In this way, public punishment, when done correctly, serves as both a lesson to the violator and an education to those around you. When you remove your warmth and stop engaging with the person who has disrespected you, it sends a signal to others that you are not someone to be easily manipulated or taken for granted. By withdrawing your presence or withdrawing your involvement, you're not just punishing the individual who disrespects you, but you are also recalibrating the social dynamics. Others will begin to respect your boundaries more, as they understand that you are not someone who will tolerate mistreatment. People will adjust their behavior around you, as they now know that your respect must be earned and is not given freely. Over time, this creates a reputation that precedes you. You become someone who cannot be easily manipulated, someone who values their boundaries and self-respect. Others begin to adjust their behavior, not because they are afraid of you, but because they understand that crossing your boundaries comes with consequences. The withdrawal of attention and the imposition of disproportionate consequences don't need to be dramatic or vengeful. In fact, the effectiveness of this strategy lies in its calmness and precision. There is no need to make a public scene or to shout about how you've been wronged. The punishment is in the absence, in the refusal to engage, and in the quiet assertion that you will not allow yourself to be mistreated. Machiavelli's approach is based on the principle that power is not about loud displays of force, but about creating a sense of certainty and clarity. When you make it clear that disrespect will not be tolerated, you create a system where people understand the rules and act accordingly. They may not always like the consequences, but they will respect them. This concept also ties into the larger idea of social leverage. People are often more concerned with losing access to valuable relationships or resources than with the offense itself. By withdrawing your presence or cutting off access to your time and energy, you make the violation feel much larger than it really is. In many cases, the person who disrespects you may not even realize the value of what they have lost until it's gone. This is what makes the consequence disproportionate. It's not just a matter of retaliating in kind, but of making them feel the weight of their actions in a way that forces them to recognize their mistake. In conclusion, creating consequences that are disproportionate to the offense is one of the most effective ways to maintain control and assert your boundaries. This approach, as Machiavelli suggests, is not about revenge or drama. It's about establishing a system where respect is earned and where any violation of that respect is met with a clear and firm response. By withdrawing your attention, energy, and involvement, you not only punish the person who disrespects you, but you also send a message to everyone around you. Disrespect will not be tolerated, and there are consequences for crossing the line. Through this method, you assert your power without needing to escalate the conflict, and you teach others how to treat you with the respect you deserve. Machiavelli's teachings are often misunderstood, and many people focus on the more aggressive or tactical aspects of his philosophy. However, at the heart of his work is a profound understanding of human nature and the importance of self-respect and consistency in maintaining one's authority and image. When we talk about Machiavelli's approach to respect and image building, we see that the key is not to seek approval or forgiveness, but to focus on maintaining your self-respect and standing firm in your principles. The idea is to establish yourself as someone who commands respect, not because you demand it, but because you demonstrate through your actions and consistency that disrespect has consequences. This process of building and maintaining respect is not about seeking validation or striving to be liked by others. In fact, the moment you shift your focus away from trying to please others and toward preserving your own dignity, you'll find that respect starts to come naturally. When people see that you will not tolerate disrespect, they begin to respect you for your strength and consistency. Machiavelli understood that when you stop seeking others' approval and instead focus on your self-respect, you send a powerful message. You become someone who doesn't need to explain themselves or defend their worth because others can see it without you saying a word. One of the most significant elements of Machiavelli's philosophy is the understanding that consistency is key to building respect. When people are uncertain of your boundaries or think that you can be pushed around, they are more likely to test you. But once you establish a clear standard for how you expect to be treated, and you enforce that standard with consistency, you make it clear to others that you are not someone who will bend. You don't need to constantly assert your power or make a scene. Instead, you maintain your boundaries quietly but firmly, and over time, this creates an image of someone who cannot be disrespected. Machiavelli's concept of self-respect is critical here. It's not about arrogance or pride. It's about knowing your worth and demonstrating it through your actions. Self-respect is the foundation upon which all other respect is built. When you respect yourself, others are forced to recognize and respect you in turn. This doesn't mean being inflexible or unapproachable, but it means that you have a clear sense of your own value and will not tolerate behavior that undermines it. In fact, the most powerful individuals are those who do not need to chase after validation or approval. They simply project an aura of self-assurance and self-respect, and others are naturally drawn to that. A great example of this can be seen in leadership, in both personal and professional settings. True leaders are those who inspire respect not by constantly seeking it, but by maintaining integrity and consistency in their actions. Take, for instance, a manager at work who has established clear expectations for behavior and performance. This manager doesn't need to constantly demand respect or reinforce their authority with harsh words or actions. Instead, they maintain a calm, consistent demeanor and stick to their principles. When employees see that their manager's word is law and that there are real consequences for violating the rules, they start to respect the person not out of fear, but because they understand that this individual values integrity and self-respect. On the other hand, someone who constantly seeks validation or approval from others is often seen as weak or insecure. They may try to please everyone and avoid confrontation, but this lack of consistency weakens their authority. People may like them on the surface, but they won't command respect. This is why Machiavelli's advice about focusing on self-respect rather than seeking others' approval is so important. When you stop focusing on pleasing others and instead focus on building your own image based on your values and principles, you begin to shape the way others perceive you. In personal relationships, this principle is equally powerful. Imagine someone who is constantly seeking approval from their partner or friends, always trying to be the nice person, the one who never rocks the boat. While this might seem like a good way to get along with others, it often leads to being taken for granted or disrespected. On the other hand, if someone consistently upholds their own boundaries and demonstrates their own worth without needing constant validation, they are seen as strong and self-assured. Over time, this person becomes someone that others not only respect, but also look up to. They're not trying to be liked, but rather they're projecting an image of someone who is confident in their own worth and will not tolerate mistreatment. Building this kind of respect requires consistency. As Machiavelli points out, once you establish your boundaries and demonstrate that you will not allow anyone to cross them, you create a clear image of yourself that others can't ignore. This consistency becomes your armor. When people see that you don't back down from your principles, that you don't tolerate disrespect, they will respect you, even if they don't agree with everything you do. Respect in this sense isn't something that's demanded or begged for, it's something that's earned through your behavior, your principles, and your consistency. What Machiavelli also emphasizes is the need for a calm and composed demeanor in the face of disrespect. This is crucial because emotional reactions often undermine your position. When someone disrespects you and you respond with anger or frustration, you lose control of the situation. Your emotions take over and you give the other person power over you. But when you remain calm and measured, you demonstrate strength and control. This is how you build respect. It's not through explosive reactions or loud confrontations, but through quiet strength and the ability to handle conflict with composure. This idea of remaining calm and composed is also tied to the concept of presence. When you have self-respect and consistently maintain your boundaries, you create an aura of authority and presence. People naturally gravitate toward this kind of energy because it signals strength and stability. They know that you cannot be easily manipulated or disrespected, and this makes you a figure of power in any situation. Your presence alone becomes a statement of your worth, and others learn to approach you with the respect that you've cultivated through your actions. Machiavelli's approach to building and maintaining respect also emphasizes the importance of removing yourself from situations where you are disrespected. This is not about running away or avoiding conflict. It's about making it clear that you are no longer available for mistreatment. When you stop engaging with someone who consistently disrespects you, you send a powerful message that they no longer have access to your time, energy, or attention. This act of removing yourself doesn't need to be dramatic. In fact, the less dramatic it is, the more powerful it becomes. By simply refusing to engage, you assert your self-respect in a way that words alone cannot do. People often make the mistake of trying to explain their worth or defend themselves when they're disrespected. They argue, they justify, they seek validation. But this often leads to frustration and a sense of weakness. Instead, by standing firm in your boundaries and refusing to engage in petty arguments, you communicate your worth without having to say a word. Over time, this consistency in maintaining your standards and not tolerating disrespect will solidify your reputation as someone who commands respect. Ultimately, Machiavelli's strategy for building respect isn't about forcing people to admire you or seeking external validation. It's about focusing on your self-respect and acting in a way that reflects your own worth. When you do this, you become someone who doesn't need to seek approval. Your behavior, your principles, and your consistency in upholding them speak for you. You become a person whose presence commands respect, not because you demand it, but because you project strength, dignity, and authority through every action you take. People will respect you not because you asked for it, but because you've earned it by remaining steadfast in your principles and refusing to tolerate anything less than the respect you deserve. And there you have it, Machiavelli's timeless wisdom on how to handle disrespect and turn the tables in your favor. By embracing silence, strategic withdrawal, and redefining your relationships, you can stop being treated like a doormat and start commanding respect in every aspect of your life. Remember, the goal isn't to make noise or seek revenge, but to remain so composed, so in control, that others automatically adjust their behavior around you. By making your boundaries clear and consistent, you ensure that people understand where they stand with you, and they'll think twice before ever disrespecting you again. Now, I want you to think about the relationships in your life. Where do you need to set stronger boundaries? Where have you been letting disrespect slide? It's time to start implementing these strategies and watch as your life transforms, as your relationships start to reflect the respect you truly deserve. If you enjoyed today's video and found it valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us reach more people and create content that can change lives. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave a super thanks to show your support. Every little bit helps us continue to provide you with the tools and strategies to level up your life. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay strong, stay respectful, and keep building that inner power